I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are.
Senators, this trial in the final analysis is not about Donald Trump. The country and the world know who Donald Trump is. This trial is about who we are. Who we are. My friend Dar Williams says that sometimes the truth is like a second chance. We've got a chance here with the truth. Do we still believe in the separation of powers? President Trump tried to sideline or run over every other branch of government, thwart the will of the people at the state level, usurp the people's choice for president. This case is about whether our country demands a peaceful, nonviolent transfer of power to guarantee the sovereignty of the people. Are we going to defend the people who defend us? Not just honor them with medals, as you rightfully did yesterday, but actually back them up against savage, barbaric, insurrectionary violence? Will we restore the honor of our capital and the people who work here? Will we be a democratic nation that the world looks to for understanding democratic values and practices and constitutional government and the rights of women and men? Will the Senate condone the President of the United States inciting a violent attack on our chambers, our offices, our staff, and the officers who protect us? When you see the footage of Officer Hodges stuck in the doorway, literally being tortured by the mob, if government did that to you, that would be torture. And when you see that footage and he's shouting in agony for his dear life, it's almost unwatchable. When the Vice President of the United States escapes a violent mob that's entered this Capitol building seeking to hang him and calling out traitor, 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 and when they shut down the counting of the Electoral College votes, is this the future you imagine for our kids? Is it totally appropriate, as we've been told? Or as Representative Cheney said, is it the greatest betrayal of the presidential oath of office in the history of our country? And if we can't handle this together as a people, all of us, forgetting the lines of party and ideology and geography and all of those things, if we can't handle this, how are we ever going to conquer the other crises of our day? Is this America? Is this what we want to bequeath to our children and our grandchildren? I was never a great Sunday school student. Actually, I was pretty truant most of the time. But one line always stuck with me from the book of Exodus as both beautiful and haunting, even as a kid, after I asked what the words meant. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. The officer who got called the N-word 15 times and spent hours with his colleagues battling insurrectionists who had metal poles and baseball bats and hockey sticks, bear spray, and Confederate battle flags posed the right question to the Senate and to all of us. Is this America? Dear senators, that's going to be up to you now. In whatever committees and subcommittees you're on, whatever you came to Washington to do, to work on, from defense to agriculture to energy to aerospace to healthcare, this is almost certainly how you will be remembered by history. That might not be fair. It really might not be fair, but none of us can escape the demands of history and destiny right now. Our reputations and our legacy will be inextricably intertwined with what we do here and with how you exercise your oath to do impartial justice. Impartial justice. I know and I trust you will do impartial justice driven by your meticulous attention to the overwhelming facts of the case and your love for our Constitution, which I know dwells in your heart. The times have found us, said Tom Paine, the namesake of my son. The times have found us. Is this America? What kind of America will we be? It's now literally in your hands. Godspeed to the Senate of the United States.
These depositions should be done in person, in my office, in Philadelphia. That's where they should be done. Incitement it's a point in time, folks. It's a point in time when the words are spoken and the words say, implicitly say, explicitly say, commit acts of violence or lawlessness. And we don't have that here. So for the House managers to say we need depositions about things that happened after, it's just not true. But if he does, there are a lot of depositions that need to be happening. Nancy Pelosi's deposition needs to be taken. Vice President Harris's deposition absolutely needs to be taken, and not by Zoom. None of these depositions should be done by Zoom. We didn't do this hearing by Zoom. These depositions should be done in person, in my office, in Philadelphia. That's where they should be done. I don't know how many civil lawyers are here, but that's the way it works, folks. When you want somebody's deposition, you send a notice of deposition, and they appear at the place where the notice says. That's civil process. I don't know why you're laughing. It is civil process. That is the way lawyers do it. We send notices of deposition. In the
I would remind everybody that we will have order in the chamber during these proceedings.
This is the statement of Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler, February 12, 2021. In my January 12th statement in support of the article of impeachment, I referenced a conversation House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy relayed to me that he'd had with President Trump while the January 6th attack was ongoing. Here are the details. When McCarthy finally reached the president on January 6th and asked him to publicly and forcefully call off the riot, the president initially repeated the falsehood that it was Antifa that had breached the Capitol. McCarthy refuted that and told the president that these were Trump supporters. That's when, according to McCarthy, the president said, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are." Since I publicly announced my decision to vote for impeachment, I have shared these details in countless conversations with constituents and colleagues, and multiple times through the media and other public forums. I told it to the Daily News of Longview on January 17th. I've shared it with local county Republican executive board members, as well as other constituents who asked me to explain my vote. I shared it with thousands of residents on my telephone town hall on February 8th. Mr. President, I now move that the Senate admit the statement into evidence. Before I proceed, it was suggested by defense counsel that Donald Trump's conduct during the attack, as described in Congresswoman Butler's statement, is somehow not part of the constitutional offense for which former President Trump has been charged. I want to reject that falsehood and that fallacy immediately. After he knew that violence was underway at the Capitol, President Trump took actions that further incited the insurgents to be more inflamed and to take even more extreme, selective, and focused action against Vice President Mike Pence. Former President Trump also, as described by Congressman Butler's notes, refused requests to publicly, immediately, and forcefully call off the riots. And when he was told that the insurgents inside the Capitol were Trump supporters, the president said, quote, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are." Think about that for a second. This uncontradicted statement that has just been stipulated as part of the evidentiary record. The president said, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people," meaning the mobsters, the insurrectionists, "are more upset about the election than you are." That conduct is obviously part and parcel of the constitutional offense that he was impeached for, namely incitement to insurrection. That is continuing incitement to the insurrection. The conduct described not only perpetuated his continuing offense, but also provides to us here today further decisive evidence of his intent to incite the insurrection in the first place. When my opposing counsel says that you should ignore the president's actions after the insurrection began, that is plainly wrong. And it, of course, reflects the fact that they have no defense to his outrageous, scandalous, and unconstitutional conduct in the middle of a violent assault on the Capitol that he incited. Senators, think about it for a second. Say you light a fire, and you're charged with arson. And the defense counsel says, everything that I did after the fire started is irrelevant. And the court would reject that immediately and say, that's not true at all. It's extremely relevant to whether or not you committed the crime. If you run over and try to put out the flames, if you get lots of water and say, help, help, there's a fire, if you call for help, a court will could infer that you didn't intend for the fire to be lit in the first place. They would accept your defense, perhaps, that it was all an accident. It was an all accident. Accidents happen with fire. But if, on the other hand, when the fire erupts, you go and you pour more fuel on it, you stand by and you watch it gleefully, any reasonable person will infer that you not only intended the fire to start, but that once it got started and began to spread, you intended to continue to keep the fire going. And that's exactly where we are, my friends. Of course your conduct while a crime is ongoing is relevant to your culpability, both to the continuation of the offense, but also directly relevant, directly illuminating to what your purpose was originally. What was your intent? And any court in the land would laugh out of court any criminal defendant who said, what I did after I allegedly killed that person is irrelevant to whether or not I intended to kill them. I mean, come on. Donald Trump's refusal not only to send help, but also to continue to further incite the insurgents against his own vice president, provides further decisive evidence of both his intent to start this violent insurrection and his continued incitement once the attack had begun to override the Capitol. All right.
As you may recall, in direct response to a question yesterday, President Trump's counsel stated, and I quote, "At no point was the president informed the vice president was in any danger," end quote. As we walk through these undisputed facts, you will see quite clearly that is simply not true. As you can see here, from just after 12 p.m. to just before 2 p.m., President Trump delivered his statements at the rally, which incited an initial wave of riot protesters coming down to the Capitol. And his speech was still ongoing, and you saw the evidence of people broadcasting that on their phones. He finished his speech at about 1:11 p.m., at which point a much larger wave surged toward us here at the Capitol, ripping down scaffolding and triggering calls for law enforcement assistance. 30 minutes later, at 1:49 p.m., as the violence intensified, President Trump tweeted a video of his remarks at the rally with the caption, quote, "Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about," end quote. During the half hour following that tweet, the situation here drastically deteriorated. Insurrectionists breached the Capitol barriers, then its steps, then the complex itself. By 2:12, the insurrectionist mob had overwhelmed the police and started their violent attack on the Capitol. And as you all know, this attack occurred and played out on live television. Every major network was showing it. We've shown you during the course of this trial, side by side, exactly what the president would have seen on TV or his Twitter account. We've also shown you that he would have seen around 2:12 p.m. images of Vice President Pence being rushed off the Senate floor. Now, I won't replay all of that for you, but for timing purposes, here's the footage reacting to Vice President Pence leaving the floor.
No audio. They just cut out. It looks like they and sometimes the Senate
like they just ushered Mike Pence out really quickly.
Yes, they did. That's exactly what just happened there.
And
they ushered Mike Pence out. They moved him fast. I saw the motions too.
Defense counsel seems to suggest that somehow the President of the United States was not aware of this, that the President had no idea that his Vice President had been evacuated from the Senate floor for his safety because violent rioters had broken into the Capitol with thousands more coming, and with the Capitol Police completely overwhelmed. This was on live television. So defense counsel is suggesting that the President of the United States knew less about this than the American people. This is just not possible. That the Secret Service failed to mention that his vice president was being rushed from the Senate for his own protection. That nobody in the White House thought to alert him. That none of our law enforcement agencies raised a concern to the commander-in-chief that the vice president was being evacuated from the Senate floor as a violent mob assaulted the Capitol. That simply cannot be. And with each passing minute on the timeline of events on January 6th, it grows more and more inconceivable. Let's continue forward in time. Between 2:12 to 2:24, the Senate recessed. Speaker Nancy Pelosi was ushered off the floor. The Capitol Police announced a breach and a lockdown, and the insurrectionist mob began chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And it was unfolding on live TV in front of the entire world. So again, let me ask you, does it strike you as credible that nobody, not a single person, informed the president that his vice president had been evacuated, or that the president didn't glance at the television or his Twitter account and learn about the events that were happening? Remember, this was the day of the Electoral College. Remember his obsession with stopping the certification. It's just not credible that the president at no point knew his vice president was in this building and was in real danger. Senators, I submit to you these facts, this timeline is undisputed. At 2:24 p.m., after rioters breached the barriers, after calls for assistance, after rioters stormed the building, after Vice President Pence was rushed from the Senate floor, and just before Vice President Pence was further evacuated for his safety, President Trump decided to attack his own vice president on Twitter. The undisputed facts confirm that not only must President Trump have been aware of the vice president's danger, but he still sent out a tweet attacking him, further inciting the very mob that was in just a few feet of him inside of this very building. The vice president was there with his family. He was in danger for his life. They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and had erected a noose outside. And as we've shown, the mob responded to President Trump's attack instantly. The tweet was read aloud on a bullhorn, if you remember that video. Insurrectionists began chanting again about Mike Pence. And in those critical moments, we see President Trump engaging in a dereliction of his duty by further inciting the mob in real time to target the vice president with knowledge that the insurrection was ongoing, and that's, of course, included in the conduct charged in this article of impeachment. The former president's counsel's suggestion otherwise is completely wrong. His further incitement is impeachable conduct that continued during the course of this assault itself, and it's part of the constitutional crime and was entirely and completely a part of his indefensible failure to protect the Congress. Now, there's been some confusion as to the phone call I referenced with Senator Lee, so I want to be clear about certain facts that are not in dispute. First, Senator Lee has confirmed that the call occurred at 2:26 p.m., so I've added that to the timeline above. Remember, by this phone call, the vice president has just been evacuated on live television for his own safety. And Donald Trump had, after that, tweeted an attack on him, which the insurgents read on a bullhorn. And a few minutes after Donald Trump's tweet, he didn't reach out to check on the vice president's safety. He called a senator to ask about delaying the certification. The call was interrupted. As Senator Tuberville has since explained, and I quote, "I looked at the phone and it said the White House on it. I said, hello. The president said a few words. I said, Mr. President, they're taking the vice president out and they want me to get off the phone and I've got to go," end quote. That was his second evacuation that day. A minute later, live feeds documented the insurgents chanting, "Mike Pence is a traitor." At this point, even if somehow he'd missed it earlier, it's inconceivable that the former president, was unaware that the vice president was in danger. And what does the president do after hearing that? Does he rush to secure the Capitol? Does he do anything to quell the mob? Does he call his vice president to check on his safety? We all know the answer to those questions too. There can be no dispute. He took none of those steps, not a single one. Even after learning that senators were being evacuated and that Vice President Pence had also been evacuated, he did nothing to help the vice president. And here's some more evidence that we've since learned. At some point over the following 30 minutes, President Trump spoke to Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. And as Representative Jamie Herrera Butler has revealed, evidence that now has been stipulated as part of the evidentiary record. In that conversation, Kevin McCarthy is pleading with the former president to do something. He first tries to assign the blame to another group, and Leader McCarthy says, "No, these are your supporters, Mr. President." And what does the president say in response? Not, "I'll send people right away. I didn't realize you were in danger." He says, "Well, Kevin," and I quote, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are," end quote. I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are. The president, just as he conveyed in that tweet at 6:01, was essentially saying, you got what you deserve.